All right, everyone, welcome. How's everyone doing today? Happy Saturday. We have a lot of stuff to go over today. Hey, Gaming Mind, how you doing, man? Welcome. I'm doing okay. My microphone is leaning. What are you doing? It's gonna fall. Oh! It's acting kind of strange. All right, so I'm good. I stayed up late playing that game again last night, but I woke up okay. Wow, this really is leaning. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good. We got a whole bunch of different articles covering a whole bunch of different stuff that's going on today. So it's gonna be interesting. How are you today, Gaming Mind? Did you get enough sleep from last night? I did. I woke up about 9. I got to bed about 12:45 and woke up 9:30 or something like that. I don't feel that tired. In the mornings, I've been taking just like a little bit of Red Bull, so that just keeps me from being too tired. Usually takes me like an hour to wake up, so I kind of sit there on the phone for about an hour, and then I'm like, okay, let's get on with stuff, and then blook, I take my shower, I eat, and then I do stuff. Though tonight I'm not gonna stay up that long. Today was awful. Did not even have energy to sit on a chair. Oh wow! So just slide in bed for a few hours. Oh wow. Yeah, that's pretty drained. What's if you're starting to feel sick or something like that, or just the sheer totality of the weight of capitalism just destroying your motivation? Oh, ooh. Hopefully it's not COVID. I blame capitalism too. Fuck that noise. Well, I hope you feel better, dude. That sucks. It's bad enough we have to contend with capitalism. Kitchen Sink, how you doing, man? Welcome, welcome. Okay, seriously, why is this thing leaning? It's super freaking me out here. Hopefully it doesn't fall. How's Kitchen Sink? Doing well? I'm good. Yeah, I stayed up late last night playing that game. A lot more. This time around, I'm playing a lot more aggressively, so it's been pretty interesting. Got to bed about 12:45. Woke up about 9:30. But I'm doing okay. Not too tired. How's about you guys? Well, Gaming Mind doesn't have anything planned. But how you doing? Conservative Party in Germany, also called CDU, which was the most popular since 2000, had literally more than 8 people stepping down today because they had corruption allegations. Conservatives? Corruption allegations? Who'da thunk? Like, how bad? Like, what sort of corruption? I mean, Europe's version of corruption is a little bit different than what we have here in the United States. A little bit. Because your people actually step down for, real reasons, where ours just sit there and say, yeah, and what? And they still keep doing their thing. Like Donald Trump. Yikes. He should have been in jail decades ago. Decades ago. For anyone that's new to the channel, Free Xenon, James O'Neill, like having a secret deal with people to earn money with masks. Ah, okay. Yeah. Please tell me Jen Spawns and sure is amongst them. So, not a fan, huh? I mean, Cameron was a worm, but he straight up resigned when he lost the referendum. Yeah, and that's the way it kind of should be. I mean, if only we could have a little bit of that dignity and honesty here in the United States. Oh, Christian Party. Oh, they're the worst. Christian conservatives in politics, they're the worst. Yeah, I couldn't either, Kitchen Sink Defense, and that's that would be amazing if we could have a level of honesty and dignity in this country, but alas, not to be found here. If only, again, this is why Europe is decades and decades ahead of us here in the United States, where all we have is absolute and total corruption, and they don't give a fuck because you can't do anything about it. Maybe someday. It's going to require drastic, radical change here for that to happen. And I've got some new people watching us from a few different places. This is my electoral reform policy. If you guys are interested in that, I know my regulars here on Twitch, you guys see me share that all the time. And this is my blog as well. If you're that bored and need to put yourself to sleep, I got a lot of good sleeping material here. Yeah, it'd be awesome to see a president. Well, it'd be crappy to have a president be in that position, but to have a president in that position actually resign because it's the right thing to do would be, it would be amazing. But yeah, to get to that point requires radical change, which is what my policies, of course, are about. Start with philosophical foundations, electoral reform. It's amazing how much has to change. Oh no, donuts. They're just more complicated. Horseshoes. Yeah, they definitely can be. Most definitely. My nephew plays. There's this game here. I don't know. You guys probably have it over there too. Called it's throwing a beanbag. At this thing. It's kind of at an angle and it's got a hole in it. We call it cornhole, or there's another name for it. I don't remember what it was, but he's really good at that game. I've only played with him once, and it was pretty embarrassing how horrible I was. Albeit that's the only time I've ever really played it. So, but he was really good. Yeah, donuts. Very complicated. Great book. I added it to my required reading for my policies, which you can find here. It has a great look at how messed up economics is from its very foundations and how it's more of a cult. So she kind of goes through that, talks about that sort of thing, but also talks about how we need to rethink economics and that sort of a thing. Spawn might be amongst them. Some donator gave them, almost 10,000 euro, which is €1 under the cap. Yep. We have to publicly say, yep. We have one where you throw a beanbag into a hoop on the ground. It's similar to that, although the hole is like this. It's super small, so you really got to be accurate. Oh, let's go look. Okay, I have to be careful on this because it's a thing. I gotta find, yeah. All right, hold on. Cornhole. Here we go. Looks kind of like this. Wow. You stand back and you whip it, from like 10 or 12 or 15 feet and try to get it in here. Well, hopefully that's correct. Get rid of spawn, whoever this is. So yeah, you throw it here. You can slide it up here. I think points are done based on how close you are to the hole or something like that. I don't remember. Yeah, if you're going to search out cornhole, please be very careful because that also has some very strong sexual connotations if you're not familiar with that English slang. I'm sure. Yeah, that's yeah. The hypocrisy and the corruption within, Christian, very strong Christian conservative parties is stunning. Stunning. All right, so let's get this ball on the roll. We'll start here. Talked a little bit yesterday about urban sprawl, right? And here's another one I found that kind of went into that a little bit more, but from a very different angle. This is from the 2017, so this is from a little while ago, like right when the potential self-driving cars kind of hopped onto the scene. All right. Anyone have any other comments before we get started? Anything else? Get started onto self-driving cars. Anything? Anybody? Elias, man, how you doing? Welcome. We're just about to get started on the first article on self-driving cars. Just interested in how this article will turn out and how they will make connections to public transport. Okay. Yeah. It'll make sense. How about you? I'm good. I stayed up late again last night, like 12:45, playing that game, but I'm doing pretty good. Got up about 9:30 or so, set my hour, getting awake, did a little bit of Red Bull, and I'm good. And I'm here. Woohoo! Parking to place to switch to public transport since you need to get in the city for work anyways. Yeah, and that, so we talked about urban design. If you want to reduce urban sprawl, you need to change the way you design, way you engage in urban planning. So that's the first thing. And a part of that, of course, would be what you're talking about, right? You've got self-driving cars as a mixture of the part of how we deal with mass transportation. You got buses, trains, and that sort of stuff. And that's something that when I envision a resource-based economy, so if you want to go somewhere, you say, all right, I want to go from here, my home, to a city over. How would you do that? Well, the resource-based economy, the RBE app would say, okay, well, based on what's going on, you can catch a personal urban transit mode like a scooter or something like that. Take that over here. You can grab a self-driving car, which will take you over to the intercity train, and then that'll get you over to the next city. So you can come up with this integrated plan for someone to get from place A to place B. And it's easier to do with everything is centralized and integrated, and much more difficult if you don't have a very an urban plan which is built from the ground up to take that sort of thing into account. Okay, so driverless cars could see humankind sprawl even further into the countryside. Now, we can think about this just from the very basis of if you don't have to think about the driving and you can just kind of passively sit there, you can do other things, then you could understand psychologically that you'll care less about the drive. Girly Bear, you made it again at the beginning. How you doing? Welcome. Well, good luck doing that in some European countries. Right. And this is a problem. And it as I talk about my policies, I've been to France. I've been to Cannes. Oh, that's not necessarily the same. Although it's been 20 years since I've been there. It's basically all small villages. Right. Yeah, exactly, Elias. Yeah. So that again requires, urban planning from the ground up. And that's something that can be dealt with. That would take, time and money to deal with that. But it can be done. It can be done. And obviously, small villages are slightly different, at least from a certain standpoint, than large cities. But you could still, start with small villages and do some redesign there. Even integrate to an extent the larger scale mass transit, at least, allowing people to get from one place, one village to the major city. Self-driving cars could be a large part of that to enable the movement of people from, smaller villages, more rural areas into larger urban areas. But yeah, that's an undertaking. All right. Self-driving cars will change how we live in all sorts of ways, but they won't just affect us humans. The coming revolution in autonomous transport has significant implications for wildlife as well. Nature conservationists and planners need to think hard about the impact of driverless cars, most notably in terms of renewed urban sprawl. Yes, of course. Again, like anything, Elias, this takes a lot of time. Just getting to the point where you can get urban planners to embrace a form of urban planning that is centralized and is built from the ground up, designed from the ground up for a specific population to take into account, mass transit. I mean, it's a lot more common in Europe, but here in the United States, it's not a thing because we're stupid like that. But it can be done. It can be done. It requires cultural change, values change. PSAs can help with that, public service announcements to try and educate people on the importance of it, the benefits, and that sort of thing. But yeah, yeah, it's much more important to do it for larger urban areas, at least to start, than it is with the more rural areas, because the benefits we gain from it. Nature conservationists and planners need to think hard about the impact of driverless car vehicles, most notably in terms of renewed urban sprawl. In some ways, wider developments in automotive technology bode well for the environment. Electric cars will increasingly replace the internal combustion engine, and that should, in theory, reduce carbon emissions and health afflicting air pollution. Now, again, this is 2017, so this is a lot of, bit more theory crafting, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. We talked about, several weeks ago, the harms of pollution, with like 8.7 million people dying per year with due to pollution based problems. A lot of it's cardiovascular, right? Through minimizing traffic jams, driverless cars may also reduce overall energy use. Unlike human drivers, computers can avoid the concertina effect of needless acceleration and braking that exacerbates congestion and won't be tempted to rubberneck when passing an accident. And as autonomous vehicles aren't restricted by human reaction times, it may make sense to increase speed limits for them on major inner city routes. And of course, interstates and stuff like that too. You could have cars going a lot faster to get, to cross larger distances faster. So driverless cars promise a future of faster journey times with much reduced environmental impacts. They may even mean less wildlife roadkill, but it's the very efficiency of driverless cars that pose a challenge for planners and conservationists. The threat is an unchecked increase in low density urbanization. So an increase in urban sprawl, in other words. So, and again, that can be stopped by the values change with urban planners saying, no, we're not going to do that. Driving into the countryside. Autonomous vehicles promise a future in which passengers are free to use their time productively, working, for example. They can park themselves or be part of a shared pool, which saves yet more time in the morning rush. Coupled with faster journey times, the incentives to live further out of town will increase significantly because they're wasting less time and don't have to, deal with driving themselves. There are both push and pull factors at work here. Sky-high residential prices in most cities push people away from urban centers, while healthy environments and green living pull people towards the hinterlands. The limiting factor in suburban spread is often travel time, either by public or private means. Driverless cars fundamentally alter the equation. So, right, and this is, again, yesterday we were talking, Anaholics asked about people having access to their own like garden or green space like that. And again, that is an urban design issue, much like they're talking about here, right? So people want to get away from the cities and getting to healthier, greener environments. Well, that's something that can be dealt with on an urban planning scale. Like Girly Bear shared those two links on urban like apartment designs, which has a significant amount of green space. So that can be done. You can design your apartment complexes, your cities with green space in mind, and that's what should be done. So if you design your cities that way with green in mind so that people have access to it, a lot of access to it, this can greatly limit people fleeing from urban centers. So again, this can be dealt with through urban design. And yeah, and just honestly saying no to this. If you design properly, this becomes less of an issue. Existing planning policies are based on our current transport systems. Or actually, our current transport systems are based upon our current urban designs. If you design the city, again, I talk about this in my policies, right? That if you want to have, you cannot design the world of tomorrow on the infrastructure of today. So if you want a city with sustainable energy, vertical farming, mass transportation, then you need to design the city from the ground. Lots of green space, right? You need to design the city from the ground up to do that, and then it will be a thing. Whereas trying to retrofit an existing broken infrastructure like we have currently here in the United States and around the world is much more difficult, which is why I advocate for creating new cities from the ground up with the sort of world that we want to create, and then recycling the old cities and rewilding the old cities as well. So they got this kind of a little bit backwards. What did they say? They said existing policies are based on our current transport systems. Now, again, like I said, our existing transport systems are based around our broken urban plans. So if you want to fix the transport system issues, you fix the urban plans. However, the reduced transport times offered by driverless cars make it easier to live outside the belt while still working inside. So these loops of green are in danger of becoming a thin layer in a sandwich of ever-spreading suburbanization. This is, of course, a familiar challenge since the rise of the automotive age in the 1940s. However, the solutions designed by planners have been calibrated for human driving automotive system, not for the supercharged future of driverless transport. Other examples of planning protection for wildlife include nature reserves, national parks, and in the UK, areas of outstanding natural beauty. Such areas have either strict controls on development or do not permit it at all. However, there are nice places to live in or nearby. The coming revolution in automotive journey times and the ability to work behind the computer-driven wheel will make living in such areas increasingly compatible with a commute to the nearest city. And of course, also people working remotely as well will help to enable this as well. To help enable people to live, near larger green spaces, but also could be a way to reduce people going to and from work if they can just do it remotely. Sick of sprawl. Natural habitats being lost entirely or splintered into ever smaller fragments have long been understood as some of the primary causes of species extinctions across the world. Renewed urban sprawl threatens to increase the magnitude of both habitat loss and fragmentation. These threats are well known among conservationists, but there are differences of opinions on how best to respond. And like I said, you build brand new cities from the ground up, and you build up, and you build down, then you recycle the old cities and rewild everything. There's this, I shared this yesterday, I think, the video from Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur, talking about arcologies. This is an amazing channel. If you want me to find it and share it, I can go ahead and do that. But they effectively crunched the math and said, if we build arcologies, like one every mile, we could fit pretty much the entire population of the United States on the entire outside of the country and have the entire inside of the country completely wildlands. So we can reduce urban sprawl, we can reduce the damage to the natural environments, and we can engage in large levels of conservation and rewilding and so on by building up and building down. That's really what we need to do. This is important, of course, because one study that we've covered here said that by 2064, our population will peak at 9.7 billion. So we're gonna have a lot more people. It's gonna take a lot because of we build our cityscapes out through sprawl. It's gonna end up damaging more of the environment. So we need to stop doing that and start building up and down to help prevent the damage to the environment. We're already suffering enough through climate change. It's just gonna get worse if we keep doing that. Okay. For example, eco-modernists advocate a strategy of land sparing, whereby human activities are concentrated into urban areas and vast tracts of land are set aside for nature. There are many cultural and ethical problems inherent in herding humans into cities, but the near-term planning issues posed by autonomous vehicles will exacerbate the challenge given they will boost demand to live in unspared lands. Now, there's also the Donut Economics book talked about the commons. We need to take a lot more of this, natural land and turn it into the public commons so that it's owned collectively by the community and managed by the community, and to, help keep it from being developed and harmed, and make sure that, it's being conserved so that we can maintain our natural lands. Alternatively, some conservationists advocate land sharing, in which human communities redesign the way we farm and live so as to coexist with wildlife. Cheek by jowl. Autonomous vehicles pose significant challenges for either approach by supercharging the fragmentary effect of road systems. Whichever approach is taken, we'll need to redesign existing systems and policies to take into account the increasing range that driverless transport facilitates. This may involve new zoning laws to protect wider areas of countryside than at present. It certainly requires further development of green infrastructure, habitat corridors, and greenways. Yes, this is in my policies too. I love this idea. Right, these are wildlife crossings or green crossings or whatever they're called. We need a lot more of these. These need to be all over the place. We watched the video on Bhutan, I don't know, a month or two ago, and they've gone so far as to ensure that every single wild area is connected to all the others, so that if like a critter from one part of the country wanted to go to like the farthest side of the country, they could do that by going from green corridor to green corridor and just keep going all the way across. I think that's an amazing idea. And of course, these wildlife crossings are a large part of ensuring that they have this connected natural lands. Because these, like they're talking about here, these roads cut and bisect and segment our natural areas in harmful ways and end up, of course, getting road kills and accidents and all sorts of things. It might also involve engineering solutions, especially given the fact that autonomous vehicles should be much more amenable to being driven underground. Okay, it is possible to imagine a future in which the famous bear bridges of Banff are tiny precursors to a vast program in which rural highways are covered with forests of green. Retrofitting roads into tunnels won't be cheap, but it becomes easier when human drivers are taken out of the equation. Software drivers are less bothered by artificial light and more efficient at mitigating the congestion impact during construction. We have some of those in my city. Do you? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm jealous. I would really love to see more of these. My father almost got hit by a deer driving over one. Yeah, that sucks. My mother's hit a deer at least once. I think my sister hit one too. I've been fortunate to not on his cycle. Oh, that sucks. Is he okay? Hoping he's okay, because hitting a deer going fast on a motorcycle would be devastating. Holy crap in a box. I had a psychopath next to... okay. Yeah, I can see that being problematic. Yeah, wow. Hopefully he's okay. Oh, a bike? Okay, so that wouldn't be quite so bad, but it would still be kind of painful. Okay, all right, good. So everyone got out of that just fine. The deer as well. We definitely need a lot more of those here in the U.S. I don't know. I'm sure we have some somewhere. I don't know where, but again, that's really comes down to urban planning. We need to change how we approach urban planning and taking these things into account. And that, of course, isn't done because it's a values issue, which is why my policies, I start with the values change. The 8 philosophical pillars for peace has the natural world as one of the, top 3 values, right? Well, they're quite expensive. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't imagine many countries have too many of them, because it's kind of a fairly new, probably in the last decade, that these are starting to become a thing. But we need a lot more, and this needs to be a core part of how our counties and our cities and states start designing things. It needs to be kind of an assumption that you're going to have these. I don't know how bridges are the most expensive thing with highways. Yeah, I bet, because there's a lot of cement involved. So I wonder if they can find more sustainable ways or more cheaper ways to do it without, reducing the safety of it. But yeah, it needs to be done. Or like this article just said, we could do it underground too. And I've considered that as an option as well. If we had pretty much tunnels the whole way between city to city, then honestly, we wouldn't need driverless cars. It would just be, like we talk about kind of with resource-based economies, that going from place to place would be an underground train or a hyperloop or something like that, something that goes super fast to get you from one place to the other, so that we don't have to rip up the natural world above. And that's one way. Like if we did the, Atlas pillars, these really tall, self-contained, um, buildings to house, the entirety of civilization, then you could just have the city, the Atlas pillars, and then it's connected with Hyperloop underground. So you can save even more of the natural world. I feel like they also got a limited purpose. In real rural parts, the motor highway isn't that bad since there's not too many people driving on it, and in the cities, there's just not enough nature. Okay, all right. Yeah, exactly. In cities, there just isn't enough nature. Exactly right. And that's an urban planning thing, and that's a values problem. It always, like everything we have, all of our problems come down to values problems. So we need to change our values so that we can change the way we do our urban planning. And again, making sure that our cities have a lot of green space is very important. It helps reduce pollution. It helps to increase the biopsychosocial results from that. People having access to nature is a big deal, and we need to have green cities need to be green. That's the way it needs to be done, and that, again, it's a values issue, urban planning issue. It might also involve engineering solutions. I already just read that. Okay. Much conservation policy is based on planning for the world we live in now. Strategic conservation planning needs instead to take account of likely futures. And in the future of driverless cars, that is likely to result in the megacities of the 20th century becoming the mega sprawls of the 21st. Unless, of course, planners and conservationists rise to this new challenge. Exactly, and that's what I've been saying. We have to plan for a future that takes into account the environment and greenery and that sort of a thing. Hugely important, because if we don't, sprawls are exactly what we're going to end up with, and that's a big, big problem. Especially as we start getting to almost 10 billion people on this planet. Chad, man, how you doing? Welcome. You started listening? We only did one article already. It's this one here on the effects of driverless cars, potentially increasing urban sprawl. Right there. How you doing today? Just about to start this one. I read most of this today. It's interesting. And it kind of goes into, well, yeah. I think that the ability to not have a vehicle will allow us to increase our density, not spread out. Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly what we're talking. Okay, yeah. So you're talking about so right, this could go both ways, right? If you assume that the driverless vehicles are centralized and controlled and people don't own them and it's part of mass transportation, you're exactly right. That not having a vehicle will increase our density. That's exactly right. But if people, have the driverless cars, then if people own the driverless cars themselves, then like the article says that, the drive doesn't really matter because you can work on it. So you can go further and further out of town because you can just work on your commute. Need to see Flanders in Belgium. Okay, so much of our infrastructure is set up for parked cars. Yep, if they are not necessary anymore, then half of that space goes. Yeah, exactly right, Chad. That's exactly right. But that's not what's going to happen because of the way we are here in America, unless we change our policies. And it's really pointing to kind of that. We need to make we need to make the policy changes. We need to make the values changes in order to make that a thing. So it could be, right, Chad, that our cars, if we own them personally, could take us to work and go back home again. Now, that would be interesting. That could save parking space like you're talking about. Pure economic terms. Sure. Right. It could be. It could be. It's just a matter of putting the policies together so that we could realize that reward. Definitely. That would be a good thing, right? That we get rid of the parking lots and turn them to green space. That would be amazeballs. That comes down to, it's a policy thing, of course, and a values thing. If we still own those cars and can send them home, that would be complete fucking stupid. Because of the energy or what? If people still own cars, they're going to have to park them somewhere. Complete waste? Yeah. For the energy, it could be, sure. I mean, they got to be parked somewhere. One of the primary things we need to do is get rid of, well, parking space can be. Yeah, it can be. It can be. Yep. Parking spaces can be optimized. Yep, there's like these parking towers where you go there, it puts it in a tower and yeah, elevators, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. You can definitely do that. Those are definitely things we can do. But ideally in the long run is designing our urban spaces so that we don't have people using cars at all for the most part. Again, making sure mass transportation is there. Got urban transit things like scooters and stuff like that. Energy costs money, so the more energy waste, the more expensive it will get. Owning cars will just be priced out of market. I don't believe that even a little bit. It's just going to get cheaper. Energy is going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to the point where it's not going to matter, because as we get into more sustainable options, geothermal, tidal, all these other things, it's just going to get cheaper and cheaper, especially once we start moving into public ownership of energy production, that sort of stuff. It's going to become so much cheaper. But you're right, it would be a waste. Having the car take you to work and then going home and then coming back again. But that would really, getting to that point where driverless cars are a thing is going to make Uber, like automated Ubers, a much more powerful thing, much more useful thing. So that if like the city set up, bought these driverless cars, set up a mass transit based around that could radically get rid of much of this. But then, of course, that ends up being problematic if you have significant urban sprawl and your urban place isn't designed from the ground up to be, more centralized. Yeah, it's a values issue, a policy issue, and then, of course, that is reflected in the urban design. Yeah, lots of changes have to be made in order to really ensure that driverless cars, don't end up causing harm or creating more problems. Keep talking about centralization. I like decentralized model better. Well, I call it centralized decentralization, I guess. Cities can centralize things, but then, of course, each city itself is centralized in its own way. Decentralized definitely has some benefits, but that ends up having more waste in the process generally, because if everyone has a car, we already have that. That's a huge amount of waste. Whereas if we have centralized transportation, centralized mass transportation, that greatly reduces many things. Waste, huge reduction in resource waste, that sort of a thing. Centralize. Yep, centralization. So what has to happen to save energy, to save resources, to save all sorts of things? Yeah, man, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. It was good to be on there and actually talk to you. We always, like you said, cross ways on Facebook, and it's not or whatever, and it's not necessarily the best place to have more in-depth conversations like this. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, man. And thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay COVID free, and thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. All right, so how the salvation of New York City drinking water can be a model for saving the planet. This is from This is from like a week ago, about 10 days ago. go ahead and I shared this. Okay, I'll go ahead and share this again just to make sure you guys have it. All right. New Yorkers are rarely a soft-spoken group, particularly when boasting about their city. Time Out magazine lists 50 reasons why New York is the greatest city in the world. Greatest skyline, greatest theater, and on and on. These brags should come as no surprise. Everyone has heard of the Empire State Building in Times Square, but you may be surprised at what the magazine lists as the number one reason New York is so great. It's the drinking water. And you don't need to take the magazine's word for it. New York tap water routinely wins blind taste contests against even the priciest bottled water. While New Yorkers may know their tap water tastes great, a few know that it comes from 125 miles northwest of the city, and even fewer know that innovative ownership design lies at the heart of providing over 1 billion gallons of safe and refreshing water to 9 million people every day. But Al Appleton knows. Appleton is a bear of a man with a quick wit and disarming candor. In 1990, he became commissioner of the New York City Department of Environmental Protection and director of the city's water and sewer system. He immediately faced a dilemma. Unlike most big American cities, New York did not have the treatment plants for its tap water. Showing great foresight, in the early 1900s, the city had laid huge pipes from the undeveloped Catskill Mountains far to the north and west to bring the region's pristine water down to a giant reservoir near the city. Apart from mechanical filters at collecting reservoirs to keep out sticks and leaves and chlorination to kill bacteria, the water went almost directly from the mountains to faucet in apartments in Manhattan and homes in the Bronx. Starting in the 1980s, though, small farms in the Catskills watershed came under economic pressure. They increased fertilizer use and began selling land to residential subdevelopers. As the population grew and land use intensified, the clean water that New York City had taken for granted came under threat. Coupled with a revision to the Safe Drinking Water Act, it looked like New York would need to build a huge treatment plant for Catskills water with a price tag of up to $4 billion, along with $200 million more annually to operate the plant. Instead of going ahead with the construction, though, Appleton took a step back and looked to the ownership toolkit. Most everyone assumed a new treatment plant was inevitable, but Appleton reframed the problem. The watershed's vegetation and soil had been doing a great job breaking down contaminants, trapping sediments, and filtering toxics. The result was admirably high-quality drinking water. Instead of spending enormous sums to treat water downstream, how about investing instead to restore the upstream landscape? Was it possible to avoid spending money at all on a big plant? As Appleton put it, a good environment will produce good water. So this is the sort of thinking that we need to be looking at when we're looking at urban design and dealing with our problems. We need to, like my 8 philosophical pillars for peace, right? Looking at how we are interdependent. Humanity is interdependent with itself and also interdependent with the natural world. This is exactly the sort of thinking we need to be looking at. Thus began an 18-month process of more than 150 meetings with local groups in the Catskills, negotiating land management practices to ensure water quality. One participant described the endless meetings as similar to a rolling Thanksgiving dinner with relatives you only want to see once a year. The final agreement was signed by 60 towns, 10 villages, 7 counties, and environmental groups. New York City committed to spending $1.5 billion to acquire sensitive lands, restore stream corridors, and fund partnerships that would foster water quality and support economic development in the watersheds. And leave, I have to say, Arkansas sucks. Yeah, I have a link on that, and we will definitely be going over that, man. Yes, Arkansas, conservative, sucks to be there. Yeah, have a great day, have a great weekend, stay safe, stay COVID-free. Thanks for stopping by, man. The results have been impressive. Water pollution dramatically declined. New York City pavements have proven popular with rural upstate landowners. And the EPA was persuaded that the watershed initiatives would provide safe drinking water, so the federal government has repeatedly waived the requirement that New York City build the multi-billion-dollar treatment plant. As a result, in purely financial terms, New York came off ahead by investing in natural capital rather than rather than in built capital, investing in green rather than gray infrastructure. The program is paid for itself many times over. So that's, when I talk about Arkansas has nice nature. Okay, fair. So this is sort of stuff that we need to be really thinking about, how we need to be thinking about how we're going to deal with many of our societal problems. Looking at nature, how we can work in tandem with it to keep nature healthy, and how it can, if we keep it healthy, it can help keep providing for us. Leave the state and the people separated. Yes, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, that's obviously what he's talking about. But yeah, state's pretty, but the government definitely fucking blows. Anywhere there's conservative government, it will always blow. Horrible. And this is this stuff here is kind of what the Donut Economics book talks about. And this is how I think about it. This is what we need to be doing. But what does all this have to do with ownership? We tend not to think about ownership when talking about the environment, the benefits we receive from nature, the clean air we breathe, the stable climate, fish schooling in the ocean, scenic vistas across landscapes seem like they must be goods common to all. That's a lovely notion, but it's also a problem. Common ownership works well when resources are abundant, but often fails as populations grow and technology changes. Valuable resources are free for the taking, we tend to take too much. Take it for granted, right? The result of common ownership is that we're overfishing the world's oceans, cutting down tropical forests, and overusing the atmosphere by emitting greenhouse gases at historically high levels, driving climate change. At this rate, the world of our children and grandchildren will be very different from the one we grew up in, and not for the better. So, when we talk about common ownership, this is more, honestly, I think this is a kind of a false way of talking about this. It's not so much common ownership as it's not owned by anyone, and therefore it's not managed. When you look at nature and commons, or common ownership, then it's about what kind of this article is talking about. It's actual, management of the nature and conservation of the nature and making sure it stays healthy. So if we're actually in owning the natural landscapes in common, so that we're actually managing it and conserving it, that's definitely what we need to be doing. Then we reap all the benefits. Just as the Catskills watershed provides clean drinking water, nature provides all kinds of critical services that we take for granted. Insects pollinate our crops, microbes in the soils break down waste, and create fertile fields for farming. Coastal marshes protect against storm surges and provide habitat for young fish. These are all examples of common resources that benefit everyone and are owned by none. We all enjoy the wild birds and butterflies flying around us, but the people whose lands provide the habitat for this wildlife receive no compensation in exchange. If they don't own the resources and can't charge for them, then they have little reason to protect or invest them. Yeah, that's true, and that's why owning such things in common, or providing grants or tax incentives or stuff like that for people to make sure that they're managing or protecting their natural spaces well is a good thing. Again, it's a values thing, which drives policy, which can drive what people do, which is what my policies do. Values first, then policies. Oops, get back over here. Common ownership works well when resources are abundant, but often fails as populations grow and technology changes. Yes, so that's just a quote. And again, this doesn't have to be a thing if our values are aligned appropriately. If we have the right values, the policies will follow, and then the failure won't hopefully happen. Wetlands, for example, may protect towns by slowing storm surges after filtering drinking water. If landowners convert wetlands into homes or farms, they may benefit financially, but the community is made far worse off by flooding and dirty water. Because no one owns wetlands services like flood prevention and water purification, landowners don't take the value of those services into account when deciding how to use their land. If the choice is to earn a living by farming the wetland or or earn nothing by preserving it, then the choice is simple: fill the wetland. Yeah, we had that article a few months ago talking about the actual economic value of land left wild, right? So this is another way that we can look at doing that. We can actually, you know, calculate up what is the value that the wetlands provide, and then maybe provide tax incentives for people to keep it that way, right? So the ways we can do this, there's policy ways we can reinforce this, but we have to have the values to start to make those policies a thing. Appleton's great insight was to innovate around ownership design. He told Catskills landowners that New York City would deal with them as if they owned the environmental services attached to their land. See, exactly like that. We don't think twice paying for potatoes or coal attached to land, so why not pay farmers for improved water quality? Exactly. Appleton crafted an ownership tool where wealthier downstate city dwellers could pay poorer upstate farmers to preserve a clean environment. Yeah, there we go. He showed how to motivate farmers even in the absence of state law, giving them ownership over the environmental benefits their lands provide. This approach of creating what we call as if ownership in nature's bounty has exploded in recent decades. James Salzman has been working with governments around the globe since 2000 to develop payment schemes that compensate landowners for providing natural services. In recent work, he identified over 550 active ecosystem services programs around the globe with an estimated 42 billion in annual transactions. I think wasn't the article we read have him in it too? I can't remember. Let me check. I don't know if I put this in here or not. Did I put that in here? I don't think I did. All right. The strategy is being used to try to save the world's rainforest. Tropical rainforests contain most of the world's species diversity and capture vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, playing a critical role in slowing climate change. Deforestation is responsible for up to 20% of global warming. Today, swaths of the Amazon forest, often called the lungs of the planet, are burning. Yeah, we covered that before, and it's fucking horrible. The basic problem is that people who live in the forest don't own the environmental resources they provide. They can't charge for wildlife habitat or storing carbon. Even though these resources are critical to humanity, we receive them for free. Not surprisingly, owners and squatters in forests focus instead on things they can sell. They burn forests, they clear them for grazing, logging, and agriculture. The challenge is to make trees worth more standing than cutting down. And that's kind of what the article said that we went over. Maybe I got to find that. I'll find that and I'll post that in Discord because it's really, really interesting. It's very relevant to what we're reading here. Norway, of course, is doing just that, trying to offset some of the climate harm it has caused by extracting North Sea oil. Thanks to its sovereign wealth fund, profits the country accumulated from oil sales, Norway has been able to spend tens of billions of dollars paying people in the Amazon, Indonesia, and Mexico for their efforts to reduce local deforestation rates. Okay, that's cool. If the rate of forest loss slows, more trees are left standing and more carbon is captured from the atmosphere. China has made an even larger investment. Ecosystem service payments have become a central component of the country's nationwide environmental protection strategy. See, that's what we're talking about there. China has already paid over $50 billion to farmers and households to increase forest cover. By planting trees instead of chopping them down, China gets flood protection, wildlife habitat, and water quality, all shared goods that come along with investing in trees. So can we use ownership to steer people to conserve nature rather than despoil it? Absolutely. Around the world, new types of ownership to promote environmental goods are changing the behavior of farmers and forest dwellers, timber companies, and big landowners. They now compete to protect environment and make money in the process. With $1 billion program here, $1 billion there, ecosystem services ownership begins to add up. While substantial already, these programs are not yet nearly big enough. the key to addressing some of the world's greatest environmental challenges may be to encourage people to call ever more aspects of nature mine. Yes, that is a good way to start. All right, any comments on that? Now we're going to talk about Arkansas, because that's next on the list. Oh, no, yeah, Arkansas. Whoa. What have you done? There we go. So here's some really, really ridiculous, horrible news. All right, here we go. Arkansas governor signs medical conscience objection law. Here we go. Oh, you're outside walking your cat? Yeah, we just finished the article and we're about ready to move on to the Arkansas issue. Welcome back. We can't, our cat is too afraid. The wife tried taking him outside, but he's way too afraid of everything, which is kind of a good thing. That way he's not, running outside, getting hit by a car and getting eaten by dogs or whatever. All right, Little Rock, Arkansas, Associated Press. This is like this week, right? I'm pretty sure this is this week. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson on Friday signed into law legislation allowing doctors to refuse to treat someone because of religious or moral objections. A move opponents have said will give providers broad powers to turn away LGBTQ IAP patients and others. Now, as some memes say, if this is where you stand, if you're willing to deny anyone for any reason, you should have your license revoked and you should be kicked out of healthcare or any form of public service at all. Anything. You shouldn't be working in diners, you shouldn't be owning, businesses. I mean, if you're going to be bigoted and harm people, that's highly problematic. Okay, maybe not quite that bad, but you get the picture. The measure says healthcare workers and institutions have the right to not participate in non-emergency treatments that violate their conscience. The new law won't take effect until late this summer. Opponents of the law, including the Human Rights Campaign and the American Civil Liberties Union, have said it will allow doctors to refuse to offer a host of services for LGBTQ patients. The State Chamber of Commerce also opposed the measure, saying it sends the wrong message about the state. Okay. Hutchinson opposed a similar measure in 2017 that failed before a House committee, but he said the law he signed was narrower and limits the objections to particular healthcare services, not treating specific types of people. I support this right of conscience so long as emergency care is exempted and conscience objection cannot be used to deny general health service to any class of people. Well, what? Hutchinson said in a statement released by his office. More importantly, the federal law that prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, sex, gender, and national origin continue to apply to the delivery of healthcare services, just not LGBTQ people, right? Fucking bigots. All right. Opponents have said that types of healthcare that could be cut off include maintaining hormone treatments for transgender patients, needing inpatient care for an infection, or grief counseling for a same-sex couple. They've also said it could also be used to refuse to fill prescriptions for birth control. We've already seen something like that go on. Or by physician's assistants to override patient directives on end-of-life care. Yep. There's no sugarcoating this. The bill is another brazen attempt to make it easier to discriminate against people and deny Arkansans the healthcare services they need, ACLU of Arkansas Executive Director Holly Dickinson said in a statement. The ACLU did not say whether it planned any legal action to try to block the law before it takes effect. Hopefully they do. The law is among several measures targeting transgender people that have easily advanced through the majority Republican legislature this year. Hutchinson on Thursday signed a law that will prohibit transgender women and girls from playing on sports teams consistent with their gender identity. Oh, this guy's a real fucking winner, huh? A final vote is scheduled Monday on another proposal that would prohibit gender-confirming treatments and surgeries for minors. Wow, this guy's amazing. The Human Rights Campaign announced Friday that it would air a television ad in Arkansas during the Arkansas Oral Roberts game in the NCAA tournament, which is basketball, on Saturday night, denouncing measures. Oh, that's college basketball. Denouncing measures such as transgender athlete restrictions in Arkansas and other states. Trans kids are kids. They don't deserve this cruelty, the 30-second spot says. The bills are advancing as hate crimes measure backed by Hutchinson has stalled in the legislature after facing resistance from conservatives. That's surprising. The bill would impose additional penalties for committing a crime against someone because of their characteristics, including their sexual orientation and gender identity. Okay, well that's, of course, conservatives are going to not do that. Okay, so that's what's happening in Arkansas, and that's what who said this? Who just left? Blah, 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 blah. Someone said that. So that's what's happening in Arkansas. Here is the next one. All right, next. This is from yesterday. California Supreme Court rules it's unconstitutional to detain people in jail because they cannot afford bail. All right, so debtor's prison, right? This is something that was ended like in the 1800s or something like that, but it still exists today because cash bail, because it's one way I work to fix that is basically it's a percentage based on your income, so that if you meet certain guidelines, as in you have no money, there is no bail. And the more money you make, the more that bail should be. Just like fines and fees should be proportional, and bail and stuff like this should be proportional as well. Or getting rid of it altogether would be fine too. Although I haven't read enough on this to know if that's the way I want to go. California Supreme Court ruled on Thursday that it is unconstitutional to keep people behind bars simply because they cannot afford bail. The unanimous decision signals that going forward, California judges will be required to assess a defendant's ability to pay bail when they set it. What we hold is that where a financial condition is nonetheless necessary, the court must consider the arrestee's ability to pay the stated amount of bail, and may not effectively detain the arrestee solely because the arrestee lacked the resources to post bail. Justice Mariano Florentino Cellular wrote in the decision. The justices concurred that there may be circumstances where the need to protect community safety may conflict with the arrestee's fundamental right to pretrial liberty. But said that in order to detain an arrestee under those circumstances, the court must first find by clear convincing evidence that no condition short of detention could suffice, and then ensure that detention otherwise complies with statutory and constitutional requirements. The decision came out of a case brought forth by Kenneth Humphrey, a San Francisco man accused of robbing a man for $7 and a bottle of cologne. In 2017, Humphrey was charged with first-degree residential robbery and burglary against an elderly victim, inflicting injury on an elder adult, and misdemeanor theft. A judge initially set Humphrey's bail at $600,000 before reducing it to $350,000. Holy fuck in a box. That's insanity. Okay, again, when we look at the way we deal with this, people who commit crimes are victims of the system. Why do most crimes happen? Poverty, homelessness, lack of education, lack of a livable minimum wage, housing, right? So you gotta look at why this Humphrey man is doing these things. Well, perhaps we should look at these sorts of things. You solve these sorts of things, and guess what? You wouldn't have to see him in fucking court again. Again, this is the people, the 1% destroying people's lives just so they can make money, instead of actually solving the root cause of why these crimes are happening. They just keep throwing money at the police and destroying people's lives for fun and profit. Fucking balls. Yay, America. It is unclear how the state will maintain a standard threshold for the need to protect community safety, Santa Clara University law professor David Ball told the editor, doubled up, told the East Bay Times. According to the American Bar Association, around 500,000 people are currently in jail because of their inability to pay bail while they wait for their cases to be heard, which is kind of messed up. Problem of being unable to make bail disproportionately impacts communities of color, right? Racist, classist, right? According to the Northern California American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU also found that Black and Latino people are far more likely than whites to be denied bail and held in pretrial detention. Of course, because systemic and structural racism, which is very alive and well, of course, within our, quote, criminal justice system and, in the country in general. This never ends. In one of the most well-known examples, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was sent to New York City's Rikers Island after he was accused of stealing a backpack. A judge denied Browder the right to bail, and the teen spent 3 years, 2 of which were in solitary confinement, at the jail. He died by suicide at 22. And there's 2 things here, right? Fucking solitary confinement needs to be ended completely, right? That should never have happened. He was 16 at the time? Are you fucking kidding me? And of course, going to jail when he didn't even go to trial, if I remember correctly. He didn't even go to trial, and he was at Rikers, and he was held, and he may have been innocent. If I remember that correctly. If someone has an article on this or knows otherwise, please let us know. So I think that's what happened. The Prison Policy Initiative, a nonprofit that works on prison reform, found that Black defendants are at least 10 to 25% more likely than white defendants to be denied bail or detained pre-trial. Additionally, the PPI said Black and brown defendants receive bail amounts that are twice as high as bail set for white defendants, and they are less likely to be able to afford it. Bail reform organizations hope California's decision will help set precedent in other states. I am pleased other people will have the same opportunities I had to change their lives, and they will not have to wait in jail for years because they are too poor to pay bail, Humphrey said in a statement Thursday, according to the Huffington Post. Okay, so again, another way to potentially fix this issue is you could have bail set by math, specifically by math and certain things, right? So that'll keep it a little more consistent. But one thing I've considered as a way to deal with this, although I don't think this is necessarily realistic, is when something goes to trial, you don't have the person in the room, but every crime is different. Oh, right. You're right, Elias. That's why it's not perfect. So there's going to be some leeway in there, and yeah, no, you're exactly right. That's why what I'm saying isn't perfect, but it's one way to help mitigate the problems with the racial issue. right? Another way to possibly do this is that when the case is going through the system, that you scrub everything that deals with race or name or address or anything like that could possibly identify the person's socioeconomic status, race, or that sort of a thing. And if they have to speak in court, it could be washed through electronic ways so that they don't hear the voice, or someone else could speak for them. To do as much as we can to help keep race, gender, socioeconomic status out of the courtroom, so that the case itself can be judged based just on the merits of the case itself, and to help ensure or reduce the effect that race, socioeconomic status may be taken into account by the judge or the jury, and that sort of a thing. But it would be very, very difficult to do that well and properly. But it could help mitigate many issues. It'd be difficult to do, very difficult to do. So that's something that I've considered as a thing. I don't know if I blogged about that idea or not, but it's something I've been thinking about. All right, any thoughts on that, my peeps? But you don't think a judge would act differently based on how we're acting in court? Well, yeah, they of course they do. But if even the jury doesn't get to see the person, right? Because the person's not there, it's done probably remotely, and you've got someone else speaking for them. We don't have access to name, pictures, or anything like that. So it'll help mitigate the bias of the jury as well if you help to isolate the socioeconomic, racial, ethnic components of it from the justice process altogether. Right? Yeah, so the judge would try to be isolated from it. The jury would be isolated from it. Try and isolate it from the whole process altogether, so that keep it as safe as possible, as unbiased as possible. Yeah, it sounds interesting. There's a lot of, but I'm judge. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with doing this because it's very tech heavy to do this. But it's one way to help deal with that. All right. Next, I read through most of this, and it's pretty interesting. I hadn't quite considered this as a possibility for the Second Amendment, so they're going to work on making this case. Why it's time to repeal the Second Amendment. It needs to be repealed because it's outdated, a threat to liberty, and a suicide pact, says constitutional law professor. Now, we're talking about this, I think, from the standpoint, of course, of gun crimes and things of that nature. Now, I do have policies on this, right? And it's law enforcement and gun control, right? Law enforcement and guns. So I have policies on this, but I wonder if I talk about this directly. But guns aren't the necessary problem. Gun violence is, do I talk about this here? Do I need to? I don't. I need to add an introduction to this. I'm going to write this down. Because if you really want to deal with gun crimes and gun violence, what you need to deal with is inequality. Deal with inequality, and a lot of this is just going to go away. All right, so here we go. It's bigger so we can see it. All right. I teach the Constitution for a living. I revere the document when it is used to further social justice and make our country a more inclusive one. I admire the founders for establishing a representative democracy that has survived for over 2 centuries. That is false. Well, it may be a, quote, representative democracy, right? But it doesn't actually represent the people, when it was created. was classist, racist, and it was misogynist, right? It's originally only what, white land-owning males could vote. So women couldn't vote, people of color, obviously slaves couldn't vote, and even white males couldn't vote either. But most of them couldn't. So, okay, sure. Well, everyone was back then. Well, you're right. But the Constitution, like every said, yeah, no, that's fair. You're right. It is a byproduct of the evolution of the social systems and the culture and stuff like that. Yeah, that is fair. That is a fair criticism. But the United States, of course, hasn't evolved beyond that, like a bunch of European countries, especially the Nordic countries. Nordic countries are significantly ahead of us in the values race. The United States is, of the developed countries, is very, very behind. And also as a criticism of that, right, as you're kind of bringing up, United States, our Constitution is one of the first constitutions that created kind of a democratic system. I mean, following the United States, a lot of the revolutions happened all throughout the world, especially in Europe, all throughout Europe, right? And many of them looked at what the United States did and learned from that and learned how to not do it incorrectly, or at least to do it better. So I did this, listened to this amazing, great course on Voltaire, and he came to the United States to look at our constitution, or look at our constitution and our democracy to see how we did it, and then he brought that back to France following the French Revolution. So yeah, that's being the first doesn't mean we're gonna do it right the first time. All right, because sometimes we just have to acknowledge that the founding fathers and the Constitution are wrong. This is one of those times. We need to say loud and clear, the Second Amendment must be repealed. As much as we have a culture of reverence for the founding generation, it's important to understand that they got it wrong, and got it wrong often, which is important. Unfortunately, in many instances, they enshrine those faults in the Constitution. For instance, most people don't know it now, but under the original document, Mitt Romney would be serving as President Obama's vice president right now because he was the runner-up in the last presidential election. Oh, and this was written, this is important here because this is in 2016, June of 2016, point that out. So this is 5 years old almost, but still quite relevant. As much as we have, that part of the Constitution was fixed by the 12th Amendment, which set up the system we currently have of the president and vice president running for office together. Much more profoundly, the framers of the Constitution were wildly wrong on race. They enshrined slavery in the Constitution in multiple ways, including taking the extreme step of prohibiting the Constitution from being amended to stop the slave trade in the country's first 20 years. Oh, I didn't know that. They also blatantly wrote racism into the Constitution by counting slaves as 3/5 of a person for purposes of congressional representation. It took a bloody civil war to fix these constitutional flaws, and then another 150 years and counting to try to fix the societal consequences of them. There are other flaws that have been fixed, such as about voting and presidential successions, and still other flaws that have not yet been fixed, such as about equal rights for women, land-based representation in the Senate. But the point is the same. There is absolutely nothing permanently sacrosanct about the founders and the Constitution. They were deeply flawed people. It was and is a flawed document, and when we think about how to make our country a more, quote, perfect union, we must operate with those principles in mind. I agree wholeheartedly. In the face of yet another mass shooting, now is the time to acknowledge a profound but obvious truth. The Second Amendment is wrong for this country and needs to be jettisoned. We can do that through a constitutional amendment. It's been done before when the 21st Amendment repealed prohibition in the 18th, and it must be done now. The Second Amendment needs to be repealed because it is outdated, a threat to liberty, and a suicide pact. When the Second Amendment was adopted in 1791, there were no weapons remotely like the AR-15 assault rifle, and many of the advances of modern weaponry were long from being invented or popularized. Sure, the founders knew that the world evolved and that technology changed, but the weapons of today that are easily accessible are vastly different than anything that existed in 1791. When the Second Amendment was written, the founders didn't have to weigh the risks of one man killing 49 and injuring 53 all by himself. Now we do, and the risk-benefit analysis of 1791 is flatly irrelevant to the risk-benefit analysis of today. Yeah, and I've done some research on this. The Second Amendment is there because of racism, right? Let's actually look at the Second Amendment because it's important when you look at when conservatives talk about this, they don't give you the full amendment, and this is only pre-1800 guns. Okay, there you go. There you go. Yes, that would be one way to really mess with them. Good one. Good one. It's like I have some friends there. I think almost all my gaming friends have guns except for one. I was pretty kind of stunned when I thought about that. We had a conversation on this because it's important. So, and when I talk about guns and gun ownership, when people get guns, they suffer typically from GDS, gun derangement syndrome. Not everyone, obviously, but that's something that you'll find. Once you get a gun, you lose your mind and you become this psychotic right-wing thing, right? But the key part here is a well-regulated militia. That's the part that they completely forget. Being necessary to the security of the free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, when you're looking at the actual history of the Second Amendment, this is here because of slavery. A well-regulated militia refers to in the South when they used to have white males had to have guns in order to engage in slave patrols. They had to go out and find slaves, return them, or go kill them or whatever. That is what a, quote, militia was. This is another one of those racist policies that has become something very different than it was originally intended because of, well, primarily because the NRA, at least, well, the NRA, right, the National Rifle Association, which is now a right-wing lobbying group for the military-industrial complex. So, a well-regulated militia, slave patrols being necessary to the security of the free state, right? So slave patrols were required to suppress rebellions from slaves. The right of the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. So that is important for people to understand. There's some good scholarship on this, and actually fairly recent scholarship of the last 5 to 10 years that's come out on this. So this is important. I don't know if he's going to talk about this in here or not, but this is something important to understand when we're talking about the Second Amendment. And when I talk to my friends about this, I say, well, are you in any way well regulated? And are you in any way a militia? Okay, no. So the entire right to bear arms is predicated on you being a well-regulated militia. You're not, therefore you don't have the right, right? Not the constitutionally granted right, but also that this amendment was created to support slavery, therefore slavery doesn't exist anymore. Well, at least not in the traditional sense. I mean, it still does, but not, like it was back then, at least not in the United States, right? So therefore slavery doesn't exist. Therefore your right to bear arms also doesn't exist. At least you constitutionally protected one, right? I digress. The Second Amendment needs to be repealed because it is outdated, a threat to liberty, and a suicide pact. When the Second Amendment was adopted in 1791, there were no weapons like the AR-15 assault rifle. Many of the advances of modern weaponry were long for being invented or popularized. Sure, the founders knew that the world evolved and that technology changed, but the weapons of today are easily accessible are vastly different than anything that existed in 1791. Yeah, I'm sure they couldn't imagine how radically different things have changed. I already read all this. All right, well, I'll read it again since I'm already going through it. When the Second Amendment was written, the founders didn't have to weigh the risks of one man killing 49 and injuring 53 all by himself. Now we do, and the risk-benefit analysis of 1791 is flatly irrelevant to the risk-benefit analysis of today. Gun rights advocates like to make this all about liberty, insisting that their freedom to bear arms is of the utmost importance and that restricting their freedom would be a violation of basic rights. Again, if they actually understood it, it would be less of an issue, but they've been brainwashed by the NRA over the last decades that that is a thing. Also, the United States' toxic individuality is also a large part of that problem, and our worship of military and violence and war movies is also a large part of that as well. It's the glorification of military, the glorification of patriotism, the glorification of, well, guns. But liberty is not a one-way street. It also includes the liberty to enjoy a night out with friends, loving who you want to love, dancing how you want to dance, in a club that has historically provided a refuge from the hate and fear that surrounds you. It also includes the liberty to go and send your kids to kindergarten, first grade, so that they can begin to be infused with the love of learning. It includes the liberty to go to a movie, to your religious house of worship, to college, to work, and to an abortion clinic, go to a hair salon, to a community center, go to the supermarket, to the doctor, to go anywhere and feel that you are free to do so without having to weigh the risk of being gunned down by someone wielding a weapon that can easily kill you and countless others. The liberty of some to own guns cannot take precedence over the liberty of everyone to live their lives free from risk of being easily murdered. It has for too long, and we must now say no more. Finally, if we take the gun rights lobby at their word, the Second Amendment is a suicide pact. As they say over and over, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. In other words, please the gun manufacturers by arming even the vast majority of Americans who do not own a gun. Yeah, and there's plenty of scholarship on this showing that this isn't a thing. That if you look at 99% of all gun violence, a good guy with a gun didn't stop anyone. Now, there's been a few cases of that. Got lucky, but this just isn't a thing. This is a mythology that they like promoting. Just think of what would have happened in the Orlando nightclub Saturday night if there had been many others armed in a crowded, dark, loud dance club after the shooter began firing. Imagine if others took out their guns and started firing back. Yes, maybe they would have killed the shooter, but how would anyone else have known what exactly was going on? How would it not have devolved into mass confusion and fear, followed by a large-scale shootout without anyone knowing who was the good guy with the gun and who was the bad guy with the gun, and who was just caught in the middle? The death toll could have been much higher if more people were armed. Exactly, and this is a huge, huge problem. And there's cases where, fairly recently, especially since Trump has been president, where a person has pulled out their gun, maybe tried to do something about something, and ended up killing an innocent bystander. The gun rights lobby mantra that more people need guns will lead to an obvious result. More people will be killed. We'll be walking down a road in which blood blasts are a common occurrence, all because the Second Amendment allows them to be. At this point, bickering about the niceties of textual interpretation, whether the history of the amendment supports this view or that, and how legislators can solve this problem within the confines of the Constitution is useless drivel that will lead to more of the same. We need a mass movement of those who are fed up with the long-dead founders' view of the world ruling the current day politics. Yeah, when you get into constitutional law, there are originalists, which most conservatives are, and that's the tack that they take when looking at the Constitution. Well, that's not what they meant. Well, and as this is showing, that's fucking stupid to even consider, because they are not here today, and did not write the Constitution for today's world. The mass movement of those who will thumb their nose at the NRA, an organization that is nothing more than the political wing of the country's gun manufacturers, and say enough is enough. The Second Amendment must be repealed, and it is the essence of American democracy to say so. Watch for pro-gun arguments we're sick of hearing. Okay, let's look at this.
This massacre is therefore a further reminder of how easy it is for someone to get their hands on a weapon that lets them shoot people in a school or in a house of worship or a movie theater or in a nightclub.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. A third of people in the US are armed, yet no mass shootings in the past 30 years have been stopped by an armed civilian. But mental health. Data shows there's no reliable way to tell who is going to go off violently, and only 23% of the shooters have mental health diagnosis. Well, inequality, poverty, that is a way to do it. Second Amendment, baby. Second Amendment was written before we had electricity, much less the kind of weaponry that can be bought today. All right, there we go. All right, so there is that. Questions, comments, suggestions on this ridiculous American topic? I have a post started on this, but I haven't. I have 75 posts started on various topics. So I haven't, finished them. So yes, gun rights. Gun rights and slavery here in the United States are intertwined, and it's such a problem. And if you want to fix the gun problem, you fix inequality. You destroy inequality, reduce poverty, reduce homelessness, reduce education, housing problems, education problems, healthcare problems, and this will greatly reduce all the violence we have. And again, this comes down to a values issue, much like I talk about, right? Because our values in this country are so fucked up that we have toxic individuality, toxic patriotism, toxic everything, because our values are broken. You need to fix our values, and then that can change our policies, which can help solve our gun violence problem. UBI, universal housing, universal health care. I do think it's weird how he brings up the Prohibition Amendment being repealed to start prohibition of guns. Well, it's not that they're talking. The repeal of the Second Amendment isn't about prohibiting guns. Yeah, don't think that, because that's not what it's about. It's about getting rid of the Second Amendment worship that allows right-wingers to basically, stop any gun regulation at all. It's the Second Amendment that is the primary reason why we can't do gun regulation. It's not about getting rid of guns. It's just about being able to do gun regulation at all. And the Second Amendment is one of the primary things that are stopping us from doing that. Yeah, I can't imagine anywhere that they're going to outlaw guns. We talk about this sort of thing. When we talk about this sort of thing, I couldn't ever imagine that being a thing here in the United States. I mean, especially as nut jobbery as people are in this country about their fucking guns. I mean, it's insane. No. I would like that. That'd be awesome, but I don't think it's feasible, and I don't think it's necessary, honestly. I mean, just like I say, if you want to solve the gun problem, you solve the inequality and poverty problem, period. It's really that simple. I honestly don't know how to solve this problem, because gun culture has so deep manifestation in America. Yeah, no, exactly right. And Quiet Mercenary, that's exactly why I don't believe that there will ever be a gun ban, or people will be forcibly taking the guns away. It can be fixed. It's a values issue. You start changing our values, like I talk about, and you get rid of inequality and poverty and that sort of stuff, and that will radically change, all of this stuff. It's going to start with values first, and inequality, and then everything else will follow. Although it will take a long time to get there, because it's not just the poverty issue, the inequality issue. It's not just our values, but it's also, of course, corporate control of the government, the U.S. being imperialist, colonialist, right? So that is a values problem. That is a policy problem, but that's a whole different branch of things we have to work on in order to solve this. We need to start the United States needs to stop being the largest terrorist organization in the world. If we stop doing that, that will also help to reduce the gun problem, because there will be less fetishizing of the military, because there'll be less military stuff going on. But defeating the military industrial complex is going to be difficult, because war and violence of this nature is one of the most profitable industries in human history. Banks make billions and trillions of dollars off this. Military industrial complex, gun manufacturers make billions and billions off this. There's so much money to be lost in reducing the United States as a military power, or as an imperial power. So I imagine any president who really ran on that very heavily will probably be killed, because of the billions the banks will lose and the billions that the military industrial complex will lose. So it's bad. There's a lot that needs to be done, and that's what my policies are really here to work on fixing. Whew. 140. All right. Great article. Great article. What is this? Oh, so this is a link off there. Okay, we're not going to look at that. This I was going to put in the FYI area, but just for your information area, but we'll go over this because it's kind of interesting. Ooh. Okay, well, I guess that's fine. All right. This is from, a few days ago. Hello. Hello. Holy crap. Holy scroll. Oh, this thing scrolls too much. Innovator of the Year creates biodegradable algae solar panels that clean the air. It's a pretty picture of it. I think I need to change my mouse settings because this is going way too many. Way too many. All right. The largest source of planet warming emissions is energy consumption for industrial and domestic purposes. According to the International Energy Agency, 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions are associated with fossil fuel use for electricity, transportation, heating, and industry. Fortunately, Adán Ramirez Sanchez, a 23-year-old Mexican biotechnologist, found a solution in algae. His invention, intelligent solar biopanels made of microalgae and carbon nanoparticles. Oh my God, this thing is just crazy. Maybe this is the website, because I don't think I have this problem elsewhere. I'm going to use this other mouse here. So it's not the mouse. It looks like it's the website. Microalgae and carbon nanoparticles generates clean energy and oxygen while absorbing carbon dioxide, meaning they combine nature with technology to clean the air while generating electricity. The system works by taking advantage of the natural process by which plants, some bacteria, and algae produce energy and organic matter known as photosynthesis, using carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sunlight. The green semi-transparent triangular biopanels manufactured by Mr. Sanchez's company, Green Fluidics, measures 1 meter on each side. They're aesthetically pleasing and practical, so they can be placed almost anywhere. Windows, walls, roofs, and any surface that gets sun. And can even be used to make works of art. How about this? Let's get rid of the scripting. Maybe that'll help. There we go. It's the scripting. Hallelujah. Green Fluidics writes on its website, our patented technology, the intelligent solar biopanel, is the only multi-purpose system in the world based on microalgae algae, and nanotechnology that allows you to save energy and provides well-being and health to your occupants, while giving a unique and avant-garde design to your buildings. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology awarded Mr. Sanchez the Innovator of the Year award in 2019's Latin American Innovators Under 35 LATAM for his creation. Adan Ramirez, okay, that's in Spanish. I don't know that. Okay. Beatriz Ferreira, the Latin American director of Opino, a global consultancy firm that partnered with MIT Technology Review magazine to produce the awards, said, "The list is prepared to highlight the brightest minds of young innovators who are developing technologies and initiatives to finally solve these great challenges that concern us as a society. The biopanels are entirely biodegradable and made of an abundant renewable marine material, a fresh contrast to the current solar panels on the market, which generate landfills when they're discarded. They also produce biomass, which can take secondary products like fertilizer and contribute further to a circular economy model. Again, circular economy is a part of my policies, and that is a big thing that we need to be working towards. Although, when I get rid of the scripting, I get rid of the pictures too. Mr. Sanchez plans to eventually install sensors in the solar panels that can monitor the environment. Like this, they'll become a part of a network that provides data to address climate change. That's exactly what we need to be doing. Beautiful stuff. He also envisions them being used in the colonization of Mars. He sees Green Fluids as the first Mexican space biotechnology-oriented company. He said, "We're looking to connect outer space with planet Earth through technology we have developed. The biopanels can be used on Mars to produce energy, create oxygen safely, and provide sustenance, the algae biomass for astronauts and space settlers." Yeah, algae, and I talk about this in my environmental policies, that algae is one of the things that we really need to be looking into because it is, just like he's saying here, right? There was an article that said you take, algal pools, and they are 100 times more efficient at converting carbon dioxide than the same amount of trees, right? They also, it can be used as food, right? It's nutrient dense for food, and yeah, those two things. And it looks like they can also help create energy as well. Now, the big thing here is, what is their efficiency? I don't think what is their efficiency? Because that's kind of important. Imagine it's significantly less. It's probably near the 3 to 5% mark for efficiency, if that. Let's see. Oh, this is kind of cool. It's all on the outside. Look at that. Interesting models. Come on, what's the efficiency? All right, let's go here. Oh, come on. Why don't you give us the efficiency? All right, if someone can find the efficiency, that would be interesting. Maybe I'll do some searching and we'll talk about next time. All right, there you go. Although getting the description gets rid of the images, that's super annoying. Super annoying. All right, so here's the next. Oh, here we go. Some more environmental news, which is sad. All right, so this is from The Guardian. This is from date 2021. This is from last month. About the same time last month, exactly 1 month ago. Atlantic Ocean circulation at weakest in a millennium, says scientists. Systems underpinning Gulf Stream could lead to more extreme weather in Europe and higher sea levels on the U.S. East Coast. The Atlantic Ocean circulation that underpins the Gulf Stream, the weather system that brings warm and mild weather to Europe, is at its weakest in more than a millennium, and climate breakdown is the probable cause, according to new data. Of course it is. Further weakening the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, AMOC, could result in more storms battering the UK, more intense winters, and an increase in damaging heat waves and droughts across Europe. Yeah, so the oceans are a huge part of the temperature control or the temperature ecology of the Earth, and as that changes, the weather is radically going to change as well. Further weakening scientists predict that the AMOC will weaken further if global heating continues and could reduce by about 34 to 45% by the end of this century, which could bring us close to a tipping point at which the system could be irrevocably unstable. A weakened Gulf Stream would also raise sea levels on the Atlantic coast of the US with potentially disastrous consequences. Stefan Rahmstorf of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, who co-authored the study published on Thursday in Nature Geoscience, told The Guardian that a weakening AMOC would increase the number of severity of storms hitting Britain and bring more heat waves to Europe. He said the circulation had already slowed by about 15%. Holy crap. And the impacts were being seen. In 20 to 30 years, it is likely to weaken further, and that will inevitably influence our weather, so we would see an increase in storms and heat waves in Europe, and sea levels rise on the east coast of the U.S. Okay, the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation is at its weakest for a millennium, according to new data. Okay, so here's some pretty pictures. So it must be this here. So yeah, so it's if the temperature differential changes, it'll slow down. It's probably operating off something called natural circulation. So the higher the temperature differential, the stronger the current. And if temperature is rising, in the environment in general, and the temperature of the ocean is rising, the temperature differential is actually going to end up going down because it's going to heat up. The colder part is going to heat up more, and so the differential will go down, I think. Rahmstorf and scientists from the Maynooth University in Ireland and University College of London in the UK concluded that the current weakening had not been seen over the last 1,000 years, after studying sediments, Greenland ice cores, and other proxy data that revealed past weather patterns over that time. The AMOC has only been measured directly since 2004. The AMOC is one of the world's biggest ocean circulation systems, carrying warm surface water from the Gulf of Mexico towards the North Atlantic, where it cools and becomes saltier until it sinks north of Iceland, which in turn pulls more water from the Caribbean. The circulation is accompanied by winds that also help bring mild and wet weather to Ireland, the UK, and other parts of Western Europe. Scientists have long predicted a weakening of the AMOC as a result of global heating, and have raised concerns that it could collapse altogether. The new study found that any such point was likely to be decades away. Decades away, not hundreds of years away, but decades away. But that continued high greenhouse gas emissions would bring it closer. Decades away. Yikes. Rahmstorf said, "We risk triggering a tipping point in this century, and the circulation would spin down within the next century. It is extremely unlikely that we have already triggered it, but if we do not stop global warming, it is increasingly likely that we will trigger it." Great. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you talk about my fucking, freaking out like last Saturday about this, and just, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. It's just, as the temperature goes up, there's just going to be more parts like this that are going to once we hit those tipping points, humanity is going extinct. I mean, it's just one more thing. We just need to stop being stupid and take responsibility for, being the cause of this and just solve it. Again, like I say, I'll keep saying, if the United States decided that saving humanity from extinction was important, we could be the vanguard of the war on climate change. There's so many things we could do because we are the country with the most amount of money. We're the richest country in the world, the largest military in the world. We could literally be the spear in the war on climate change, and we could make radical change in a decade. I mean, it would be mind-blowing how much we could change. I mean, that's what my policies are all about, doing that exact thing. My policies are all based on doing just that. But the Biden administration, which, controls the House, controls the entirety of Congress, could do all of that. They could pass the Green New Deal. They could pass the federal job guarantee. They could pass minimum wage. They could pass all sorts of things right now because Democrats control everything. But why don't they? Because they're not getting paid to. Why would I do that? Fuck humanity. I got money. Research in 2018 also showed a weakening of the AMOC, but the paper in Nature Geoscience says this was unprecedented over the last millennium, a clear indication that human actions are to blame. Scientists have previously said a weakening of the Gulf Stream could cause freezing winters in Western Europe and unprecedented changes across the Atlantic. The AMOC is a large part of the Gulf Stream, often described as the conveyor belt that brings warm water from the equator, but the bigger weather system would not break down entirely if the ocean circulation became unstable, because winds also play a key role. The circulation has broken down before in different circumstances, for instance, at the end of the last ice age. The Gulf Stream is separate from the jet stream that has helped to bring extreme weather to the Northern Hemisphere in recent weeks. Though, like the jet stream, it is also affected by the rising temperatures in the Arctic. Yep, this can be a huge problem. Normally, the very cold temperatures over the Arctic create a polar vortex that keeps a steady jet stream of air currents, keeping that cold air in place. But higher temperatures over the Arctic have resulted in a weak and wandering jet stream, which has helped cold weather to spread much further south in some cases, while bringing warmer weather further north in others, contributing to the extremes in weather seen in the UK, Europe, and the US in recent weeks. Yeah, that's bad. Similarly, the Gulf Stream is affected by the melting of Arctic ice, which dumps large quantities of cold water to the south of Greenland, disrupting the flow of the AMOC. The impacts of variations in the Gulf Stream are seen over much larger periods than variations in the jet stream, but will also bring more extreme weather as the climate warms. As well as causing more extreme weather across Europe and the east coast of the US, the weakening of the AMOC could have severe consequences for Atlantic marine ecosystems, disrupting fish populations and other marine life. Yeah, it's going to be this massive cascade as the temperature of the ocean changes. The pH is also going to go up. We're seeing that already, right? The temperature's going up, the pH is going up. You said this before. There are crabs who have had their shell dissolved by the increasing pH, and that increase in temperature and increasing pH is going to end up killing the phytoplankton and eukaryotes and stuff like that, which is converts carbon dioxide into oxygen. It's going to kill fish populations, and the entire ecosystem of the ocean is going to die. And as the ecosystem of the ocean slowly dies, specifically starting with the surface level bacteria and algae and stuff like that, those things dying is going to raise the pH, which is going to help accelerate the death of the ocean ecology. Andrew Myers, the deputy science leader of Polar Oceans and British Antarctic Survey, who's not involved in the study, said the AMOC has a profound influence on global climate, particularly in North America and Europe. So this evidence of an ongoing weakening of the circulation is critical new evidence for the interpretation of future projections of regional and global climate. The AMOC is frequently modeled as having a tipping point below some circulation strength, a point at which the relatively stable overturning circulation becomes unstable or even collapses. The ongoing weakening of the overturning means we risk finding that point, which would have profound and likely irreversible impacts on the climate. Karsten Haustein of the Climate Services Center in Germany, also independent of the study, said the U.S. could be at risk of stronger hurricanes as a result of the Gulf Stream's weakening. Yeah, and we've kind of seen that recently, right? Last year, we had 2 hurricanes charge up towards Florida in that area, right? While the AMOC won't collapse anytime soon, the authors warned that the current could become unstable by the end of the century if warming continues unabated. It has already been increasing the risk for stronger hurricanes at the U.S. East Coast due to warmer ocean waters, as well as potentially altering circulation patterns over Western Europe. Dr. Levke Caesar of Maynooth University in Ireland and the lead author of the paper said sea level rises in the east coast of the U.S. were another potential consequence. Northward surface flow of the AMOC leads to a deflection of water masses to the right, away from the U.S. East Coast. This is due to Earth's rotation that diverts moving objects such as currents to the right in the northern hemisphere, Coriolis effect, right? And to the left in the southern hemisphere, she said. As the current slows down, this effect weakens and more water can pile up at the east coast, leading to an enhanced sea level rise. Wow. There you go. Got your at least single dose of doomerism, climate doomerism in for today. So that was something a little to brighten your day before we call this a day. Yeah, so yeah, like I say, this next 100 years we're going to see some significant changes in the environment, and there's going to be, we talk about climate refugees, water shortages, starvation, and this is all going to start happening. And this first 100 years is going to be fairly huge for humanity, and then it's just going to get radically worse from there. It'll accelerate, and it's going to be horrible by, again, like I've said, about 300 years. There'll basically be no life left on this planet. It'll be basically scoured of anything. But we can stop it. I believe we can stop it. If the United States gets on board and decides human extinction isn't a thing to be pro, we could stop it. We could do it. We can definitely do it. We have what we need. We have the money. We have the knowledge. We have the technology. We have the resources to save humanity from extinction and to create an amazing, amazing life for everyone. It can be done. We have it all. We just have to stop being a bunch of fucking idiots and just do it. All right. So before Girly Bear gets on me, we've reached our 2-hour mark. Because she was naughty yesterday. She's trying to get me in trouble yesterday. First call for last comments before we call this a day. Thank you for that, though, Girly Bear. I do appreciate that. Don't want to get in trouble with the wife. Fortunately, she was distracted with other stuff, and she didn't notice. So, any positive thoughts before to counteract this doomerism? I've got D&D on Sunday. That's good. I'm looking forward to that. Again, I'm playing a lizard folk druid in that. Oh, if you want to see, actually, why don't I bring it up and show it to you? I'll share with you just if you guys want to take a look at what Dungeons & Dragons might look like. There's my character. You can see it there. Yeah, we're only 4th level. Yeah, and it looks like it's going to be fun. I'm playing a lizard folk druid of the moon, circle of the moon, which has druids in Dungeons and Dragons can shape change, or they've got wild shapes, so they can change into natural animals. And the circle of the moon has a much stronger ability to change into things. So that's what I'm doing. And we're playing a maritime campaign. So that's been interesting. All right. Call for comments before we call this a day. Anyone doing anything interesting this weekend? That's all I'm doing. Yeah, normally on Saturdays is my day to do vacuuming and the laundry and stuff like that. But because I've been staying up later and getting up later, it's been shifting over to Sunday. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. My weekly chores. Anything? Last call for comments? Anyone? 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 I'm actually kind of hungry, so after this I'm going to eat. Anyone? Anything? Anything? You don't have to. It's all good. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for gifting me with your time. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Stay COVID free, and I'll see you again on Tuesday at 5. If you want to follow me on other places, you can check down below somewhere and follow me in other places too. So, and if you haven't followed me already, and you're new, follow me. If not, well, thanks for stopping by. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you later. Bye. See you, man.
Now it's just me and you. Let's make up all the rules.